know, what is something that keeps you strong when things get difficult?
I feel like at one point in my life, I may have had trouble like answering this question or thinking about it. And I can tell you without hesitation that it is my children. There have been so many moments, even in just like the last year or last 2 years, where just being with them and laughing with them, or getting to hug them after a long hard day, or just getting to see their unfiltered view of the world, like it puts so much in perspective for me.
Mhm.
And it just, sometimes I feel like they're little like comfort puppies. Which, I mean, I can't, that is like a really special thing to have to come home to every day if you need, a little self-care through a hug.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think ultimately it really, they keep me strong, and they keep that perspective is very helpful. And, putting one foot in front of the other if things are hard, and understanding that so much of what I do and how I view the world and my work is for them. And, literally in my parenting, but also, thinking about a more equitable world that they are, going to grow up in. So they guide a lot for me, and they give me a lot of strength.
Yes, absolutely. Kids are the best. And even like that sense of innocence, you know, when you've had a hard day, like you said, and then you come home, they have no clue. And
Exactly. And it just immediately, you kind of can like just let go of everything. I had a moment like this just last night at dinner. The younger one is extremely funny, like even like just comedic timing. Like she's just a nut. Like she is a ham, like so funny, to the point where it's like I'm just like giggling throughout, dinner. And like she's also like kind of misbehaving, and I can't even like keep a straight face because she's so damn funny. But just moments like that, like you said, just like the laughter, the innocence, the everything. So I'm very thankful for them.
yes, and they're cuties too. Your daughters are so cute. And what is an intention that you set for yourself for you to live your most authentic life?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is like redundant or just taking what you said and making it my answer, but my intention is really my setting my intention to live my most authentic life is to be authentic and to be honest. And I think that word authentic has come to be so like, almost overused. Like, what does that even mean anymore? And we're all online, and this whole like, with Instagram being sort of like, you're supposed to be authentic, but everybody knows that it's like the best parts of your life. And by the way, on that note, like TikTok is something that I've really gotten into, because I think talking about just authenticity and just ordinary everyday people like living their lives and seeing it, I think has been such a great space for that. But yeah, I just think like it's something that I really think about a lot. Like, it's hard for me not to be authentic, and not everybody's going to like that, but like that's all I know how to be. And there's something very like freeing about that, when you're not trying to be somebody else, or what, or hiding a part of you. So to me, that is it's key, and something that like I just don't know how else I could live, without having that sort of authenticity and honesty. And again, understanding that, not everybody's gonna like that, and I got to be okay with that, because that's who I am.
But it's so funny you said that because I feel like when we speak of authenticity, well, and I know Instagram and social media, we only show half, but I feel like you do a very good job in that in terms of like even like your TikToks, like you said, like I just spent 2 hours in the car crying, but now I'm back. Or even making something fun of yourself. I saw you on a recent interview and like your face changed. So even just being authentic and showing your personality as opposed to everything is just perfect. And I'm a New York Times bestselling author and I don't have any, things like
Yeah. I'll share. I get a kind of related question a lot, which is like, how do you deal with trolls? How do you deal with, like online discourse? And I just posted something today that was clearly like being funny. It's not serious. Like, can I live? And like all these people, and it's just funny to me at this point. They're like, oh, good to know that this is the type of thing that like the VP's niece is posting on, and somebody commented back, like, I shouldn't say this because I'm like, I don't want people to think that I read comments all the time, because I don't, because it's too much. But sometimes I do, and it's really funny. And when you talk about what makes me strong, I'm like entertainment, and just being able to kind of like laugh stuff off. But Anyway, it's just like, somebody wrote back like, yeah, sorry that she's not like only talking about politics all day long and that's like inappropriate to you. It's like, sorry, like that's just not, we're all multidimensional, and I'm showing, all sides of that. I also have, and again, we have to categorize like people who are being bad faith trolls. Like I don't, really pay attention to that to begin with. But another common one is like, that I curse too much. Like, yeah, I do. And maybe it's a little, I don't do it around my kids. I try to be mindful, but I get excited sometimes and it just, whatever. But it's just like, these silly things that we, nitpick around and I think most often are more critical, right, of women in that way, right? In terms of the language we use or how we sound, or if we're being serious, or if we're being too, or if we're being not serious enough, right? It's just like, let me live.
Yes.
And it turns out when we just try to live, it pisses off a lot of people because that's what it means to live in this world that we live in. So just kind of, comes along with the territory of being a woman online.
So my nieces and nephews, I like literally just told them, let me live, because like because they are so concerned about me not being married. And that goes like with the tweet that you said about like the Disney stories and your niece. They're like, Titi, I mean, aren't you lonely? Don't you want a boyfriend? I'm like, first off, just because I'm single doesn't mean I'm lonely. And
Right.
I'm like, let me live. And so just
Exactly.
they're just so conditioned to be like, oh my gosh, but don't you want to be married? Don't you want to have kids? Well, why aren't you married? Why aren't you have kids? You're lonely, aren't you? I'm like, yeah, calm down.
Yeah, it's like, no, I don't tie, my personal happiness or fulfillment to, whatever romantic relationships or it's just, again, it's just like, this is all of the harmful, like cultural, like, social norms that, again, we often are putting on women more than anyone else. And it's bullshit, and yes, it's just like, can I live my life? Can you, like, you do you, I'll do me, everybody will be happy. Like,
Yes.
So yeah, to answer your question, to come back to your question, that's kind of my approach, and just recognizing that again, it's not everybody's gonna be happy about it. And I only know how to be me. So sort
Yeah.
of like, I don't really have much of a choice.
Yeah. And keep being you.
You too. You
Thank
too.
you. Thank you. So what would you say is a major myth or misconception about working moms, especially Black mothers? And, how can we continue to push the needle forward to kind of change the narrative? That's probably like a twofold question.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, this idea of like, what are misconceptions? I think that the biggest misconception is that like we can succeed and achieve and do everything we want to do without basic support from our employers, from in our homes, right? And I think this pandemic has really drawn attention to that and all of us being able to see and experience, right, that our lives are collapsed in that we're, I reject this idea of like work-life balance, right? Whether you're in the office or you're at home, like it's all happening all the time, all at once. And now we're seeing it on Zoom, right? You have a kid coming into your meeting, preceding that, it's like you're in your office and you get a call from school, or you have to leave to go pick up a sick kid. And the reality is those caretaking roles, they disproportionately fall on women. We know that, whether it's an elderly parent or, as I said, a sick kid, right? And the fact is, this idea of going back to normal, like normal was not working for most working parents and working moms. And we are seeing, as a result of that, the way that this has really deepened a lot of those, inequality and inequity in the workplace, is that women and women of color are leaving, the workplace leaving the workforce in record numbers as a result of the pandemic, because they cannot do it all. They cannot juggle all these things, right? In a moment of also, health crisis and doing Zoom, school at home and just managing everything. And the reality is, what that is also telling us is that a lot of these gender inequities exist in our homes, right? We know that these roles disproportionately fall on women. And so I guess I'm kind of like flipping this, but I think the big misconception is that somehow we're all just like able to do this without, having policies and practices in our workplaces that acknowledge the fact that so much of this falls on women, and that we need to do so much more to support women in the most basic ways to set them up for success. Right now, we are setting them up for failure, literally. And that is why they're leaving the workforce in record numbers right now.
Wow. That was a good answer. Thank you. No, because you educated me. I'm like, yeah, okay, right. So what were some of your ambitions when you were a child?
Oh my gosh. I love this question because I feel like in some ways I've now come back to really getting to pursue what were my passions as a child that I kind of passed over. And my number one ambition as a child was to be on Broadway. I don't think I've ever said that publicly before. But I've had this interesting journey of like, I had really incredible, and I'm thankful for this, role models and examples of, using the law, right. And using the tool of the law to, fight for communities and to, achieve racial justice. And, I had these incredible examples of activism and social justice through the legal profession, right? Public interest law, being an elected position, public position. But as much as that, I'm very grateful for that. Like that's all I knew. And I knew at an early age also that I was very creative, that I was entrepreneurial. But I think in some ways, because I didn't have examples of that, or, I had these other great examples of pursuing a life of, doing good through the law. That's what I did. I went to law school. I was on a very traditional path, but that creative entrepreneurial stuff has like always been there. And I knew it as a kid, right? I was always drawing, like visual arts. I was always drawing and painting. I spent all my summers in art camp. Part of this is like also having a single mom where, like you need childcare, and, my mom was working a lot. And so I remember, it's this art camp in Oakland. It actually still exists, that, you either go to like the morning session or the afternoon session. And then it's like 2-week sessions throughout the summer. And most kids do like either the morning or the afternoon for 2 weeks. I did the morning and the afternoon for the entire summer. Like I was that kid in art camp, So yeah, my ambitions. But on the other hand, I probably as a kid would have told you I wanted to be a lawyer, right? Like, cause that's what I saw and I knew. And I'm so thankful for that. As I said, I would not change really anything about my path to coming back to, creative entrepreneurial stuff that I'm doing now. And it kind of took a while to get here, to really understand that, oh, like this is my real, I think, passion and, area where I'm really thriving. So I don't know, maybe I need to put going on Broadway back on my list, because man, that was like number one for a long time. Like I wanted to be on Broadway.
And you can sing and everything, hold a note, you play.
Yeah, I'm okay. I have this whole thing around with entrepreneurship, like not every good idea is worth quitting your day job for. And in the same way, like just because you can kind of sing doesn't mean that you need to be like trying to be on Broadway, but it would be really fun to try. So, I mean, my point is there's a lot of much more talented singers who are much more deserving to be on Broadway than I am. But yeah, I think I could do it. I'll tell you, my real issue was I had stage fright, and I don't have it as much anymore. And I don't know, like, what that process was about. But I remember being in high school, like when I was younger, like in middle school, I would do like our school play and things like that. But in high school, when it's like, okay, you're for real about this, right? You're going to do theater, you're going to do like the annual, play or whatever, or try out. That was the whole thing, you had to try out for it. I was too scared. I know for sure, like that's what prevented me from doing it, because I had like stage fright.
Really?
So yeah, maybe I, as I said, thank you for this, like making me remember that. Maybe I have to put that back on my list of things that I need to like try to do before I die.
But I feel like you're still tapping into that inner child, that inner girl, like even, through your children's books and just, authoring and everything that you're doing. I still feel like you're speaking to that inner child inside of you. So like we should never forget
Totally.
kid in us.
Not only inner child, but like, what I frankly, and so many people tell me this, like wish that I had as a child. My family was very intentional about, emphasizing and exposing me to, inspiring, uplifting, aspirational, images that celebrate Black culture and the Black community, including, kids' books. But the fact is there were so few, right? There still are so few. And I'm now kind of going back and thinking about what were a lot of the books that were emphasized. And a lot of them, yes, are like Anansi the spider, or what is it, like Mufaro's daughters, I think is, Snowy Day. They're all written by white people. So like even a lot of the books, I'm missing some of them that are like, is it, yeah, Faith Ringgold, I think, had a book with her, quilts. But anyway, it shouldn't be that hard for me to like remember, and a lot of the ones that did center, communities of color, Black culture, were actually not even written by Black authors. So that's all to say, or, the work that I'm doing around just, representation of girls of color as the main characters. Same thing. I can't recall, books that really centered it in that way, that was about, the reader being able to see themselves on the pages of that book. Right.
Right. So that actually brought me to the question that was further down, but since you brought it up, would you say that was the biggest void in the marketplace you noticed that led you to begin your journey into authoring children's books?
No question. It was, it was two things. One, it was very personal. It was that I, had become a new parent, and frankly was sort of almost having a little anxiety about like, oh man, I was raised in a really unique way, and it was so important for me, and like, how do I carry that on, and pass that on to my daughters? And a lot of that was rooted in thinking about the loss of my grandmother, who was such an important, vehicle for that for me. And so my first book was very personal and really paying tribute to her and everything that she taught me, taught, my mom and on. And it was such a central part of that, in our family, and literally passing that to my daughters through a family story. So it started off as a very personal journey. And I frankly thought it would be kind of this random side thing that I did, and I would kind of like a special thing, and then I'd kind of move on. But I really began to understand not only the power of children's literature to do, a lot of, we talked about this earlier, right? Like culture shift work through, what we're reading and teaching to our kids, through children's content. But the other thing is, what you just mentioned, which is then also realizing as a new parent, the lack of diversity in kids' books. We would often, change the pronouns from he to she or they, take a brown marker and color the skin in with a brown marker. I'm now like that annoying mom who like, either pauses a movie or pauses, reading a book to ask questions like, oh, why are there no female characters? Did you notice that? Or why don't we know their names? Why don't they speak? Why are they silent? Why do only the men speak? Or, and just kind of pointing that out. And at a certain point, I was like, I'm just going to write the damn book myself, because I'm not, seeing what I want for my kids. And finally, it's just, it's that point of representation, right? You can't be what you can't see. But the other further to that, like as a parent, watching your kids absorb everything around them, it's like they want to be what they see. My older daughter has now for 2 years and still going, says that she wants to be a president when she grows up, and an astronaut. And that is because she saw a bunch of women running for president. And we have a kid's book that's about Mae Jemison, right? Like, it's extraordinary the power that this stuff, has. And it's, again, the point that, all of us can have a role to play, right? As parents, as educators, as, just influencing, our communities to really think about this stuff. And importantly, these messages and images that we're teaching the next generation. Right. And I have to acknowledge just, the work of Black activists and the power of, especially last summer, the BLM protests, where, at least for me, it felt like for the first time I saw a lot of people, yes, literally waking up, right? A lot of white parents and families saying, oh, I have to look at my bookshelf. I never thought about you, right? Like, people just hadn't thought about these things. And that's the whole point. It's passive. It's right. If you're not leading with that intentionality about, and being really purposeful, you're going to, by default, continue to perpetuate and promote the status quo, which is white men in power. Right. And you see that in every space. It's, of course, not just children's content. It's also the publishing industry. It is, it's everywhere. Right. And if you bring that eye, right, of looking at issues of equity to everything that you do, I think that's when, again, we really have the chance to, change culture. And we should start, we need to start young. That's where all of this stuff begins. It's literally in our homes.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. I remember when I was my nephew, he was about 8 at the time, and he wanted to get a card for his father. And of course,
Mhm.
I'm not going to say no. But even in the children's card selection, there was no black, brown people. So, and he wanted the Superman card. And the messaging in the card was amazing. And I was like, you can get it, but you have to color him brown. He has to
Right.
look like your father. And at first he didn't get it, but now then he got it after I sat there and explained to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
I've
was
done that so many times. Like, say with greeting cards. Now we have, like Hallmark has their like mahogany line and things like that. But I mean, to your point, if it's a card that's really good that you really want, but it doesn't reflect, representation of the person you're giving it to, that's just like weird. I mean, at least, right? It's kind of like the whole thing where I haven't talked about this much, but somebody needs to have, I think I've seen some stuff written about it, but where people like, for Black families where people like will gift you like a white doll.
yeah,
And it's like, I'm returning that and getting a black doll. Like we play with black dolls in our family. By the way, it's not just for us. Like that's the other point, that it's good for white families to have black dolls and other, right, that are not just, everything that looks like them. But anyway, I've done that so many times. Like again, before having kids, I would, if I was giving a girlfriend a card or something and I would, color it with a brown marker. Like that's what you do.
right. I remember when I was younger, I got a doll, a Snow White doll for Christmas, and then the day after Christmas, I still haven't found the doll. I don't know where that doll. I don't know.
I have definitely done that. I'm like, oops, we lost it. And it's like, it's at Goodwill down the street.
Right. So being a New York Times bestselling author twice is a huge accomplishment. So outside of that, what does literary success look like to you and why?
Well, thanks for framing it that way, because I don't view, literary success as like just being, but I first want to say I'm extraordinarily grateful for all of the support that allowed me to be recognized as a #1 New York Times bestselling author. But I like the way that you phrase that, because that to me is not sort of what defines like literary success, right? It really is, and this is going to sound so corny, but it has been one of the most gratifying experiences of my life to create something that is so personal and means so much to me and feels so important, right? In terms of what I'm intending to do with it and making, positive change in my small way. But it's to see people read it and to react to it, and to see kids reciting the lines in the book, or calling themselves ambitious girl. um there's so many great stories that I hear from parents and educators around how kids react to my books. And the first one in particular that I really loved about was that kids would say, oh my god, they're real people, this is based on real people, they exist in the world right now, how cool is that? Or the sibling relationship, right? Like there's just so many other little things. There's a scene in the book that is about a potluck, and one parent told me that like her daughter wanted to like have a potluck, right? Like again, it's amazing how kids absorb all this stuff. So that to me is success, is just seeing that it's working, right? Like they're reacting to it, they're engaging with it, and it's moving them, and they're remembering it. uh and that is just, it's so special.
For sure. So in an interview with Business Insider, you mentioned the word ambition often has a negative connotation. And then they followed up and said in a study that was done by American Express and New York Women's Foundation, many women didn't like using the word ambitious to describe themselves, which
Mhm.
is so crazy to me. And they wanted to use the word motivated instead. So
Hmm.
what was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
So I've tried, as I've been doing this work around the word ambition and ambitious in relation to women, I was trying to think back just like what my first moment was of realizing that, around the power of language and specifically around that word. Um, to answer your question about like the power of language generally, I have to say, I think that I probably for the first time learned that and really engaged with that probably through my mom's work at the ACLU, and in particular in the context of criminal justice and racial justice, and the understanding that words can be stigmatizing, right? And I remember, by the way, I'm like, this is for the first time that I'm even thinking about this, so thanks for the question. But words like offender or ex-offender or felon, right? And words that follow people unfairly and affect their lives for the rest of their lives, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that's, and to experience it and understand it in that context, right, where it literally has to do with the deprivation of freedom, and someone, so that experience of incarceration, but also in the context of re-entering society and having a second chance, and or a chance, right? I mean, it's such a complicated, sorry, I'm getting like totally off topic here, but I think that's a really powerful way to understand that, right? That this has real, that in that space, it has real effects on people's livelihoods, right? When we're talking about felony disenfranchisement, and, a marker and a stigmatizing word, that a label that follows you forever, and how unfair and unjust that is, right? And I think, and I don't want to like compare these two contexts because they're very different, but I think that's the first time that I really ever came to, or the first time that I think I really interacted with that as a concept, right? That power has that language has power. Obviously, there's also the context of just activism, right? Using your voice, right? Speaking out, being precise with your language, making demands, that has power, right? Especially when we do it together, right? And you're doing it in, organizing. So anyway, but I was also going to say that I think the first time I really came to understand that around the term ambition, in particular, and female ambition, was in the political context. And it was in '08, I was working on the Obama campaign, and I was also doing a lot of local political stuff in San Francisco. And I don't remember who it was. I'm trying to, this was so long ago, but it was like, a woman who had political aspirations, and we all knew, and it's sort of like, oh, she has political ambitions, right? She's kind of like opportunistic or calculating, or, don't trust her. She's only doing this because of her ambitions, right? Like, it was just, it's this suggestion that, women are power hungry, or we're sharp elbowed, or we're, as I said, calculating, or, right? You asked earlier about authenticity, right? That you're just doing this to like be, get power. And it's just like, yeah, that, by the way, that's what men do too. And we never say this about men. Like, when was it ever, why should that be something negative that women want to succeed and achieve? Right. But as you said, that's so interesting, the study, right? That we know this, that, we're encouraged not to use that word. We have been taught that it's a negative thing, that you don't tell people that you're ambitious. You say, I'm motivated, I'm a hard worker, right? And it's because we are told, you can be too ambitious, but not too ambitious. You can be powerful, but not too powerful. Like, when you start to get too powerful, that makes me uncomfortable, and I'm gonna have to put you back in your place. Like, that's what that, suggestion is, and what we're told. So why would you show that? I did a book talk about Ambitious Girl, my kid's book, with Padma Lakshmi, and she said that she was taught to be ambitious, but not show that she was ambitious. And I think in that message is, whoever said that to her, a parent, or, someone was trying to protect her, and knew that when women show it, they get slapped down or they're punished for it, right?
Yeah, for sure. I wish we had more time. I would have expanded on that. But the phrase women's empowerment is very buzzworthy and popular these days. But I recently read one of your IG posts that says you personally reject the term. Can you expand on your thoughts and speak more about this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, let me go figure out what I said, because I want to remember, and I don't want to say anything that I don't, that I didn't think about. But I think the main point is that it suggests that we need someone to come along and empower us, and to give us power. And I think in doing so, it sort of glosses over the fact that we have power, right? Like, this is not my issue. This is your issue. It's society's issue, that there are barriers and systemic, barriers that allow me to unlock my power, to for you to receive my power and to accept it and to celebrate it and respect it, right? And so it's this idea that like we can be as powerful as we want to be and as we are, but this goes back to the double standard conversation we've been having around, the word ambition. You know, we have to address that women are often prevented from showing their power and exercising their power and getting to step into it and celebrate it, right? And yeah, wield it and be powerful, right? Because of the sexist, racist society that we live in. And so I think you also asked about the power of language, right? And that's something that's really important to me. And I think, again, there's these, like, as you said, buzzwords and ways that we're just used to talking about this stuff. And I think it's important to constantly reevaluate that, right? In terms of what are the sort of messages and assumptions that underlie, that language and how we, talk about these things, especially, in the context of women, right? And so for me, that's another one of those words, right? Like, or phrases, women's empowerment. And I think it's just that, when you do that, it suggests that we need to rely on someone else to give us power. And it often ignores, right, those systemic barriers, those challenges that, create power imbalances, right, that are intended to hold women back or intended to, prevent them from exercising power. And we see that especially in the workplace, right? We see that, I think, especially in contexts where women are trying to succeed and achieve. Same thing with the word, ambition.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I know we have a hard stop, so I will
Yes, thank you so much.